This is the agenda. We'll have welcome and roll call, Restoration Advisory Board business, Bradford Island site updates, the SMP 2025 update, fish sampling, upcoming RAB meetings, and RAB business, RAB discussion, and open public forum. Normally under Robert's rules, the chair can ask for changes or modifications to the agenda, but seeing how we have a role of chair, co-chair, and then we also have timelines to abide by. So I'm not going to be asking for changes to the agenda, and the reason I'm explaining this stuff is new RAB members can get a feel for how business is conducted in a meeting. And I'm explaining this so as soon as another member feels comfortable, I can hand off the community co-chair to another community member, because my role is supposed to be temporary, and I just want to explain everything so everybody gets comfortable with the processes. So we're going to go ahead and do roll call. Christy, but is it? Sorry, I'm having a hard time seeing this. Baptiste? Did I say that correct? Great. Valerie Hoy?
Present.
Okay, I'm here. Carl Merkel? Kate Murphy?
Here.
Mitch Patton?
Here.
Jennifer Riddle? And Andrea Sumro?
Here.
Okay.
Wait, did you call Jennifer Riddle?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. It must have cut out on my end, but I'm here.
Okay. Oh, and FYI, there is a thunderstorm coming through our area, so if I cut out, that's what happened.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and Asa, also Andrea is online.
Oh, okay, Andrea? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I assume there's a quorum from my estimate? Yep. Okay.
Yes.
So, and then old business, review changes to the ground rules for RAB communication. If I remember correctly, it's still an ongoing discussion. Am I correct?
Yes.
And then the new business would be approved July 2025 RAB minutes and the SMP 2025 update. So under RAB business, the ground rules, has everyone had a chance to read this? The changes are in red.
I'll review those for everybody real quick.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Yes.
Actually, before I discuss all the changes, I want to go back real quick to the July 2025 RAB minutes, so we don't forget to vote on those.
Okay.
So can you go ahead and I'll call for a vote, Asa?
Yeah, call for a vote to approve the July 2025 RAB minutes. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay. All those opposed say no, nay. Okay, ayes have it. Motion carries. The minutes are approved. And then do you also need a motion on the SMP 2025 update?
We'll go over that. I have some slides on that to discuss. Okay. We won't have a motion necessarily, but we'll have time for our folks to discuss, ask questions, etc.
Okay. All right.
This is Kelly. I'm just curious, we have RAB members in the room. Are you abstaining?
I wasn't at the July meeting, so I did abstain.
Okay. And Mitch?
I'll abstain from it as well.
Okay. We have 2 abstains in the room.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. I'll move right along with the ground rules for RAB communication. So to recap, this set of rules is something that was drafted at the beginning of the RAB, but was never formally voted on. So over the last couple of meetings, we have started to discuss finalizing and voting on these, we did have some suggested changes, which I'll go over in red. For all those that are completely in black, I won't go over those since those were found to be satisfactory at a previous meeting. So starting with the first ground rule, the change was at the very end, we changed the word venue to the word meeting. So we're agreeing that we can extend or shorten the meeting if everyone agrees, or if the group in general agrees. On number 2, we cut out the words set aside. So this now reads, the agenda will include time for both open discussion and public comments. So this was just streamlining the sentence here. Number 4 was regarding side conversations. We added the words during RAB meetings. So this now reads that we're only having one meeting. We don't have side conversations during the RAB meeting itself. We have one person talk at a time, or at very least we strive to. I understand it can be very difficult in a hybrid situation. Moving on to number 5, we struck the word only from this sentence. So this now reads that the USACE meeting minutes remain the official meeting record. So again, just kind of streamlining, making this more clear. Number 6 is the one ground rule where we were asked to make changes, but during the meeting, we did not agree upon what the actual language should be. So I'm going to read out the new suggested language, and we can have RAB members discuss if they're satisfied with the new language or they feel that additional changes need to be made. So the new suggested rule is, necessary decisions will be made by consensus when possible. Formal votes allow dissenting views to be voiced and for RAB members to abstain from voting. Once voted on, decisions are the official positions of the RAB. I'll open it up to RAB members now. Are folks happy with this? Are there any suggested edits to this?
This is Mitch. On number 2, is that meaning that the time allowed or included, is that after like each slide, or is that at the end of the meeting where we've actually set aside for discussion?
It's referring that there will always be an agenda topic for open discussion and public comments. That said, we do open up time as we feel appropriate in the agenda to open it up for RAB comments and public comments. So for example, we're doing RAB comments now. As we get to the SMP, I'll open it up for any discussion from the RAB or from the public, questions, etc. So it's really both.
That's what I thought it was meaning.
Yeah. But this makes sure that we always have an agenda topic, at least at the end of the meeting, for open discussion, which can kind of be like any other business. And it can give time for the public to make any other comments that are relevant to the project.
I would make a motion to approve what we have here.
I have a question. This is Kate. Can
Hi,
we just
Kate.
clarify for number 7 what relevant information encompasses? Is that like specific, like official documents? Are we talking about? Because it includes.
No, it doesn't necessarily mean. It doesn't necessarily mean like official or government issued document. It can be any sort of document or information that's related to the site or that people believe may be related to the site. So an example might be, we had those discussions on the, was it the Columbia River transmission? I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I'm blanking on the exact name, but the transmission line. We've had discussions about that, trying to discern whether it was or was not relevant to the site. So we had, we dove into it a bit more, discussed more information, and eventually we found that there wasn't an impact to the site, at least not at this point, and that we're going to continue to monitor. So that's kind of an example of it's information, it's outside of the core or the APA, but it is in the area. There's a thought that it might have an impact to the ongoing work on this project.
Gotcha, okay, great. So it wouldn't be things like an educational video that we do, that wouldn't be included as relevant information?
I mean, if we, for example, with the video that Columbia River Keepers put out on Bradford, if you want to talk about that at the end of the meeting under open discussion time, I mean, it's about the site itself. You'd be welcome to talk about it.
I'm just more concerned about what we're obligated to provide
I
and
got you.
whether, because I wouldn't think I'd be obligated to provide that. So I'm just
No.
trying to understand where the line is all.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like it's not an obligation to bring any and everything to the table. So for example, I know the Columbia River Keepers and other organizations do a number of press releases. You're not obligated to come to the meeting and share that with everybody if you don't feel it's like relevant to the meeting itself.
Okay,
You're
great.
welcome to, but not obligated per se. This
Okay.
is more of if you have relevant information on the conversation and it would help the public understand something, that would be kind of the expectation. I don't expect this is going to apply to many of our meetings. Because we do try to be very transparent, obviously. Any other questions on the ground rules?
This is Carl Merkel. I have a question and a comment or a suggestion. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. First, when you're writing up the meeting minutes and trying to capture what occurs during the meeting, do you include in those minutes views expressed or opinions or comments that are included in just the chat?
Do you mean, do we only include the, sorry, can you restate? I'm not sure if I understand.
When you do the minutes for the meeting, do you include points raised or questions asked or comments made in the chat section?
Yes, we do.
Okay. And so a comment or maybe a suggestion, I don't know, I'd offer it up, but rule number 6, it says, allow dissenting views to be voiced and for RAB members to abstain from voting. I wonder about the use of the word voiced, if maybe the term expressed would be more appropriate, because if you're writing in the chat, you're not technically voicing an opinion, but you are expressing it. So voice seems to be limited to, vocal expressions of opinion. So I didn't know about possibly adding the word expressed or substituting the word expressed. And also, I would suggest adding to that phrase, allow dissenting views to be voiced or expressed, and add the phrase and recorded in the minutes. And then continue with and for RAB members to abstain from voting. So I just want to make sure that the ground rules state that dissenting views can be voiced or expressed and that they are recorded somehow.
Yeah.
I think it would be appropriate to record them somehow, even if they, don't affect the decision. But so I invite discussion. That's just a suggestion.
But certainly can add that information, make those substitutions. Are there any discussion from the RAB on that proposal?
I guess my point is, sorry to interrupt, but I guess my point is, if dissenting views are expressed, I would hope that they're not just lost to the ether and there's no record of them anywhere, and the minutes don't reflect those dissenting views. So I would like to make sure that the dissenting views are somehow memorialized in the record, in the minutes of this process and this body.
Yeah. So to give folks some context of how we currently handle that, we do record dissenting views in the minutes. And then, of course, we do post these recordings to the YouTube channel, and so folks can hear it verbatim as well.
This is Mitch back again, but for clarification, I'm not too sure if Carl isn't talking about the chat that's in the online chat. Is that recorded somehow? Those questions. There's a lot of chat goes on in those little chat rooms on the sidebar that aren't seen in the minutes of any of the meetings that I've been to. I don't know that, I've never seen them on any of these minutes show up, but the other ones I go to, I've asked about them, they said they don't record them. So I don't know. Is that what you were talking about, Carl? Is that chat room or the chat room comments, or comments within the actual RAB meeting itself?
Well, I guess I was thinking of the chat room that appears here in this, whatever.
Yeah, on that right-hand corner.
Yeah, right-hand corner, right, or the right side, the right column, yeah.
Yeah. We have taken minutes from the meeting chat. Kelly or Lisa, can you refresh my memory? In the recordings, does it show the chat window on the side?
It doesn't show the chat, but every time there is a question or comment in the chat, we bring it up on behalf of the person that makes the comment. So it is recorded in the video and audio. So to my knowledge, we are always monitoring the chat and bringing it to your attention, Megan, so that it's voiced during the meeting. So I do not believe that we've ever missed anything in the chat, and it's always shared during the meeting.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think of that aspect, but yeah, I do. I'm sure y'all have noticed I frequently ask Kelly and Lisa for any questions in the chat. I'm typically not able to monitor it myself. So thanks for adding in that perspective in, Kelly or Lisa. So I'm happy to add that suggested wording in. Is there any thoughts from the RAB about alternative wording from what Carl recommended? Okay, so I'll ask Kelly or Lisa to please take a note for us to make a change to number 6. So it will now read, necessary decisions will be made by consensus when possible. Formal votes allow dissenting views to be expressed and recorded in the minutes, and for RAB members to abstain from voting. Are there any other discussion points or questions from the RAB regarding the ground rules? Okay, hearing none, seeing no hands raised, I will ask for it looks like Carl just added to the chat the language for you, Kelly and Lisa.
Got it.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks very much for that, Carl. So at this point, I will open the floor for a motion to approve the ground rules with the alteration that Carl has recommended. Is there a motion to approve?
Andrea Summer. Andrea puts the motion to approve.
Thanks, Andrea. And is there a second?
This is Kate, I'll second.
This is Mitch Patton, I'll second. I thought you made the motion.
Jinx, you owe me a cookie. I don't know. There's somebody online, I think that got you.
We should have enough
What do y'all
motions.
need? We got motion.
And votes now. Got it covered.
Any further discussion from RAB members before we vote? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstaining? Okay, the ayes have it. Thank you very much. And let's move on to the next slide. Okay, we're going to jump right into technical discussion. So I'll be going over the status of the project. Like last time, I am going to try to take this just a touch slower so that I'm making sure to talk about what these investigations and documents actually are and what they do. So we're starting with the site status of the Upland Operable Unit. That is the west end of Bradford Island. We're currently in the supplemental remedial investigation phase, which means we are investigating the nature and extent of the contamination in that area and investigating the potential pathways. So right now, we have just completed a second round of groundwater sampling where we are sampling water that is deep in the ground from wells that we have established around different places on the island. We completed that second round on August 8th, and we just have one sampling left to go. This is for a monitoring well that we were not able to establish until May, I believe it was May of this year. So we will be sampling that one for the second time in sometime in the fall or winter of this year. On the non-time critical removal action, so this is an action to excavate contaminated materials and soils from the Upland Operable Unit. We'll be excavating at the landfill, the pistol range. We will be excavating part of the sandblast area, and incidentally, we'll be excavating the bulb slope. And there will be other actions to help stabilize those areas, replant vegetation, etc. So we've had a lot of great progress in this area in this last month. The action memo was signed on the 18th of August. This memo essentially gave us the authorization to go ahead and perform the removal action. And shortly following that, on August 28th, we awarded a contract to perform the removal action itself. We will be meeting fairly soon here, probably in the next week or two, with the new contractor to kick off everything and start working the schedule for the non-time critical removal action. And, excuse me, as we develop that information, we'll be able to share changes here with basically refined details. There's still a lot of work to go. We have to develop a work plan to basically show how we're going to be performing the excavation, all the details and requirements that we need to track. And then we'll need to be getting on site. That is, of course, it's going to take a little while. But this is a really major achievement here that we finally awarded the contract. So I just want to once again give my appreciation to the regulators and the tribes who participated in all the work in getting the action memo approved and all your support in making the non-time critical removal action happen. So we're really looking forward to moving some dirt. Any questions on the Upland Operable Unit status before we move on? Okay, next slide, please. On the River Operable Unit, we are hard at work with the Phase 2 work plan. So just like the Upland Operable Unit, we are in the supplemental remedial investigation phase. We are still investigating the site. trying to determine the nature and extent of the contamination. The phase 2 work plan is the next set of sampling that's going to be happening under this supplemental remedial investigation. We talked about this at length at the last RAB meeting, so I won't go into a lot of details. If folks want to either learn more or refresh themselves, I would recommend going to the recording of our last RAB meeting from July. There's a great presentation on that one. So the work plan itself, we're actually just around the corner of being finalized. I thought we were having it done, so I called it good here on the slides. For prosperity's sake, I will update these slides to say will be finalized shortly. And I apologize. I thought we were going to have that done today, and unfortunately didn't happen. It'll be just another couple of days here. So within the next week or so, we'll have the phase 2 work plan finalized, and our contractor is planning to mobilize to site in September, so later this month, and start the sampling activities. This is going to be a really long sampling event. It's going to take about 4 months, so we'll have probably not a lot to report for this particular operable unit for a while, but we will share whatever information we can as we move along with it. Any questions on the river operable unit or the phase 2 work plan?
This is Mitch, man. Just for reference for people that are listening that might not know, what is that operable unit to?
Yeah, thanks, Mitch. So right now, the river operable unit starts from the Bonneville Dam itself and goes approximately 1 mile upstream of the dam. It includes Boat Rock and Picture Rock, which are 2 very small land masses in the middle of the river. It also includes an area called Goose Island, which is essentially it's a dredge pile. It was formed of dredging from the larger navigation lock, the navigation lock currently used at Bonneville Dam. It was formed of those dredges, and it sits along the Oregon shore, very close to Eagle Creek Campground. That said, this work plan is actually going to be sampling outside the operable unit as well. So as long as we're talking about geographically, I'll mention that. In addition to sampling within the operable unit itself and sampling around Goose Island and around the mouth of Eagle Creek, we're also going to be sampling downriver. So it will be outside of the operable unit itself. It will be around the Ives Island area, so just a few miles downstream. The purpose of that particular sampling is to determine if any contaminated sediments have washed downstream and deposited in areas where we would expect sediment to move.
This is Kate. I have 2 questions. One is, did you say who the contractor was that's doing the work?
For the river operable unit, the contractor is Jacobs.
Okay. And then, how are the locations for the downstream, or sorry, the below the dam testing being identified?
So
Like the
it is the locations itself. Let's see, I don't think I have a technical expert to talk to that like really in depth. Oh, actually Jay's on the line, so I might have to put Jay on the spot. Sorry, folks, my throat got really dry. Jay, could you speak a little bit to the how those particular locations were developed?
Sure. Yeah. So the locations are identified in the work plan, and I believe the last RAB meeting there was a slide that had the locations that we were proposing, and essentially they're based on areas that would be expected to have sediment accumulation downstream.
So that's based on like, are we looking at like decades of like water flow or just kind of how, I'm just kind of curious, and I apologize, I missed the last meeting, so.
Right. Yeah. And so, and I'm not our team's sediment expert, and Rich may be able to speak a little more specifically to it, but essentially areas that you would expect sediment to fall out based on the flow patterns of the river itself.
Yeah, this is Rich Francis, EPA. I can speak a little bit about that. So there are a couple of mechanisms here that we looked at. One was, sediment that was upstream of the dam that might have washed down whenever the dam operations opened up, and the flow created an erosional area, right? But it's going pretty far downstream, and that's not because of sediment transport from the dam, but historically there were maintenance dredging operations that occurred around the dam to just dredge up the material, allow boats to go through in the locks and things like that. And typically they would go down into the just downstream of the dam. There's a strait. The river. If we had a map, I could explain it to you. But there's a straightaway that happens just south of Hamilton Island. Yeah. Well, you can't really see it on that map. Yeah. So they would typically dump that dredge material into that strait, and then it would flow down that strait, and then as it opened up around Ives Island and Pierce Island, that would reduce the velocity such that you would create a depositional area. Okay. So there have been a lot of discussions about exactly what that means, like where those depositions are occurring, where the water might flow to, and we've even just this last week we were still kind of discussing possible modifications to locations just in case, just to make sure. But it is really from a sediment transport, flow regime.
That's really helpful. Thank you. And so if you found like a hot spot or something, could you modify and like do some additional testing to see where the perimeter of that would be? Okay.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Right now, for most of the investigations, except for the north of Bonneville, or for north of Bradford Island, right, the North Shore, we know that there's contamination there. So that investigation is looking to bound that contamination so that we could evaluate remedial alternatives. And downstream, it's a lot of it is the presence absence, and if there is an actionable contamination down there, then there would be additional sampling, design level sampling that we would have to say, okay, well we understand what the alternative may be. Now that we're going to go into design, we need to kind of tighten that area up so we know exactly how much we should dredge, cap, whatever the decision may be going forward.
That's helpful. Thanks.
Thanks, Rich.
I had a question for Rich. You said that for sure there's contamination on the north side of Bradford Island.
Yeah. I mean, you can see right there.
But where, because maybe I got my directions twisted, but north is like the Washington side of the river.
Well, the north shore of Bradford Island.
Well, the north shore, okay.
Right.
I thought you said I thought you meant north shore of the river. I'm going like, well, I haven't heard anything on that side of the river yet.
Well, it's funny you say that because with Cascades Island being identified as operable unit 3, there is going to be some looking at those kind of shoreline areas up there.
Yeah, in there. I see what you meant now. Right. I got it. Yep, thank you.
Thanks for that question, Mitch. Any other questions before we move on? Okay. For Cascades Island, nothing new to report on this one. So as a reminder, Cascades Island is essentially different areas around the entire island that we will be moving into the remedial investigation for. We do have a preliminary assessment where we were able to identify positively that there is actionable levels of contamination on site. And that report is, I believe, still in the process of being uploaded to the admin record. Unfortunately, there is a lengthy process that goes through to make sure that those reports are compliant with all of our systems and then get uploaded. There's also a very lengthy document. I believe it's about 1,000 pages. So it takes quite a bit of time to go through those documents to ensure that they're ready to be placed on the admin record. So appreciate everyone's patience on that. We'll be sure to let everyone know once it's available. Once we are currently working towards awarding a contract to perform the next phase of remedial investigation, where we'll be diving in deeper to find those bounds of contamination on site. We could be awarding that contract as early as this month. If not next month, I would expect the following month.
Rich had his hand up.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something about this. And for those of you that don't work for the government, right? Government contracting is one of the most tedious and nerve-wracking and bang your head against the wall things I've ever done. I've done 6 contracts for EPA, right? None of them are easy. They're all onerous. They're very difficult because you want to make sure you get everything right. And then there's a back and forth between you and contracting officers and everything else. And it's a chore. And for the Army Corps, you know, I don't want to toot their horn too much, right? But I wanted to say that it is worth mentioning that the awarding of the contract for the removal action and the awarding of the contract for OU3, doing it in such a short time, it really was a monumental task, and I wanted to recognize that on behalf of the Army Corps. You know, it may seem like it's taking a long time, but generally it's like 257 days to award a contract. Generally, I think it's like 250 something, right, days from we need a contract to actually awarding it. Generally, right, and for them to be able to get it knocked out this quickly means that they put a lot of effort into getting a contractor so they can go out there and do this work. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thanks, Rich. Appreciate that. I've done quite a few contracts for the government myself. Yes, no one really wants to do them. They are very necessary and important. They do take a substantial amount of effort. So appreciate you addressing that. Barring any other questions or comments, we can start talking about the 2025 update to the site management plan. Okay. So several weeks back, we sent a draft version of the 2025 revision of site management plan to the RAB members. This document has been reviewed by regulators and tribes, and we have responded to their comments. The RAB has been given some opportunity to go through the document itself. And for anyone not familiar with this document, it is essentially a high-level technical document that discusses the different operable units, the different primary and secondary documents that will be provided for each of those areas and what they mean, what they do, and then the milestones for those different documents. So I'll try to just give a very high level descriptions of those as we go through the milestone charts themselves. But the main update of this site management plan, which happens every year, is adding Cascades Island and then refining the milestones. We do that every year, and of course, as we get further along, we're able to refine them more and more as we get closer. I'm going to pause for a second. I saw Jackie's hand up. Jackie, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I do also want to add that this document is important because it's a part of the federal facility agreement that we have, and ultimately when we get that agreement with the FFA parties, the schedule that's laid out in there becomes very important, because if the Corps is not doing their due diligence to maintain that schedule, we do put ourselves at risk of EPA being able to incur stipulated penalties from EPA. So that's why this is a critical document when we're putting together the different pieces and the schedule and all that's taken into account.
Thanks for adding that, Jackie. And then the FFA parties that Jackie mentioned, just so folks are tracking, that is Oregon Department of Environmental Quality, Washington Department of Ecology, and EPA. So let's move on to the next slide, and I'll start to get into the milestone updates. I would say these are the main updates here. I'm going to show one of these for each of the different operable units. For each different document title, you'll see, at least for the upland and the river operable units, you'll see a grayed out date. So those are the dates that were in the 2024 site management plan. As a reminder, this is a document that's updated annually. The bold blue dates are the dates that are listed in the 2025 update. So starting with the upland operable unit, the action memo was produced in May 2025. This is the document that authorizes the non-time critical removal action. The non-time critical removal work plan is planned for January 2026. This will be looked at more closely as we now have a contractor on board. It's essentially how contracts go. We can't necessarily commit them to a certain date. We do have to negotiate and work with our contractors on reasonable dates for them to perform the work. The supplemental remedial investigation. This is the phase that we're currently in, and this is when the report for the SRI is actually produced and provided to regulators and tribes. That's currently planned for July 2027. Part of the reason that's so far out there is that it includes both the sampling efforts that we have been going through for the upland OU, but it also includes the efforts for the non-time critical removal action itself. So once we've bounded where the contamination is in the remedial investigation, we'll proceed forward with a feasibility study where we essentially start to look at what our options are for remediating that area, planning to produce that in September 2028. The proposed plan is essentially the series of actions that we are proposing to remediate on site, and then the record of decision. It's currently planned for October 2030. This actually documents the decided plan that we're going to go forward to. So we'll have a series of alternatives that we'll be assessing from the feasibility study through the proposed plan, and then whatever we decide to go forward with, that will be in the record of decision. The remedial design will actually design how we're going to do on-site work. Planned for April 2032. The following year, we're planning to produce a work plan for that remedial action. And then finally, the completion report, of course, would be at the completion of the remedial action itself. There can be, at that point, there can be long-term actions that are needed to monitor the site and ensure that if there is, that essentially that the remedial action chosen is positively affecting the area, that contamination continues to lower. The reason those in particular are so important, the fish are a really great example of that. We can completely remove all of the contamination from the upland OU, and even if we can take all the contamination from the river and Cascades Island as well, there will still be some contaminated fish on site, and we want to make sure that those contamination levels go down appropriately over time. So eventually we're getting back to like this I don't know, background level, I'm not sure is the right phrase for that, but essentially that we're getting back to a point that the fish are no longer being adversely affected by the contamination that was there. So that's a very long explanation for both the Upland OU and all the different documents. But from here, it is the same for the river and the Cascades. So we can go through a little bit quicker. Moving on to the next slide, please. So on the river, you'll see there was a slight change to the SRI work plan when we were able to produce that. And then from there, we're starting to pull the dates in just a little bit. So right now we're projecting pulling everything back by approximately a month. And the reason for that is, again, as we get just further in time, we're able to refine our estimated dates better. Moving on to Cascades. So this is a new schedule, so everything is in blue here. There are no previous dates from the 2024 SMP because this is the first year of the SMP that this is an operable unit. So these are all new dates here. We're currently working, well, we will be working with a contractor to help establish, when a work plan can be produced, but we're currently looking at providing that to regulators and tribes by April of next year. And then we're assuming we're following on with remedial investigation, feasibility study, and all the other steps here.
Yeah,
so
and
those
and Megan, I was going to jump in, and sorry if you clarified this. I had to step away for a moment. That these dates, so that it's clear for folks, that especially RAB members that had looked at this, that these dates match ones that are within the document that identify our submittal date to the FFA parties for their review, not final dates.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jackie. I think I did not hit that hard enough, even though I briefly mentioned it. So thanks for that, that clarification. So that's a review of all the milestone dates. Are there any questions regarding either the dates themselves, any of the different reports, or any other information that RAB members were able to read over in the site management plan?
Mitch, I'm just wondering, do we have anything that's kind of like this timeline that you have developed that would state when we realized or when it was realized that Bradford Island was contaminated, or when the transformers were found to be thrown into the river, and then follow that time pattern to where you're looking at 2034, and who determines what is a good timeline to be following? I mean, that seems like an awful long time. It was, what I remember was 86 or 87 when the transformers were found in that island, where that Bradford Island or the Bonneville Dam was found to be contaminated. I may have the date wrong, but I'm just wondering, is there anything that would show that timeline? This is when we knew we had an issue. Here we are in 2025, and this is what we've got done.
Sure. So the site management plan itself basically records from the date it's produced going forward. It doesn't necessarily look back substantially. There is a list, like a very brief list in the site management plan of previously performed actions that talks about that to some extent. And there's also a timeline on our website. We have some graphics that provide that information. Some of the same graphics that we actually had produced for the visitor centers.
Yeah, there's a couple places too. I mean, all of our reports try to have somewhat of a brief history. I believe the optimization report that is on the administrative record has a bit more detail, as well as there's a part of the federal facility agreement, the finding of fact, that I believe kind of went into a bit more, provide that detailed history.
Yeah. In terms of looking forward.
I was going to say, I recommend the optimization report. If you can go on and just Google Bradford Island administrative record and look at the optimization report. It's a good primer for anybody that may want to know the history of it and how they should move forward.
What's the name of the report?
It's just the optimization on the,
Optimization report?
yeah, we could probably just get you a link to it, honestly. Just drop it.
We can include a link in the meeting minutes.
Is 1987, is that the proper date? Or is that not accurate?
I'm not sure offhand. I don't think that's the
It's-
date.
It was like 9 years old. when you said
I know
that.
it's a long time ago, but I think I've seen, I actually think I've read somewhere where it says this is when we realized we had an issue. I don't know. That's why I need to be
I don't know,
nice
I
to
think the
clarify.
optimization report has it, I think the.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, Mitch, to also kind of address your comment, you know, we you know, the RI phase has unfortunately been going on for way too long. I mean, that was part of the issue that was kind of plaguing this project with that, you know, was leading it towards to why it was listed. You know, and putting it under this federal facility agreement and the changes that were made on the project to get the right folks on this project to make progress and get it back on track. The constraints, however, is that with still going through, and as we talked about before, about the CERCLA process being slow but deliberate, you know, we have certain requirements that we have to meet under each phase, then, you know, preparing reports, those internal reviews. I mean, from what I typically see on our environmental projects, usually you're getting from remedial investigation to record decision. Usually 5 years is pretty good. And then another 5 years to get to cleanup. And that's not to say that I think that is fast enough. And I know definitely for the public and interested parties, that definitely does not seem fast enough. But I just can say that is what is typically seen with going through CERCLA projects, with going through the process that we have to follow.
And for clarification, you did say 5 years?
So I said, typically we see it take 5 years from an RI to a record of decision, not through remedial action. So usually that's usually what we typically see. To get to a record of decision can take about 5 years. Again, depending on the complexity of the project, or, you know, rounds of data collection that's needed to get to that point, that can vary. And then, like I said, another 5 years to get from record of decision to completion. Also, again, depending on complexity of the project, how much data collection is needed to be able to complete a design. Plus, as Rich stated, the contractual part of each of these phases that we have to, you know, getting a contractor in place to perform feeds into some of that timeline as well. We try to be efficient where we can and try to get ahead of it, but that's not always possible. But and as we get more information, that will help us refine the schedule. Right now, a lot of the out year milestones are kind of, again, best guesses, not, you know, once we have more information, have a remedy, you know, proposed and selected, we'll be able to determine if those are really accurate timelines. For the site management plan, the ones that are really critical are the ones that are within that deadline time frame, to where we, you know, we really hone in on that schedule, and then we just continue to refine every year. But this is one where I completely understand folks' concerns and frustration. That's a very long schedule, but this is within the range of a typical CERCLA schedule.
This is Mitch back again one more time. One more question, and then I'll leave this thing alone for a while. But
Absolutely.
So, the other thing that I'm really struggling with, trying to understand, I've had people ask me and I've brought it up to them and we've discussed it. And that is, how do you determine what is non-time sensitive and time sensitive projects, and who determines that? And is there a WAC or something that defines what's time sensitive? I mean, because what's going on there is going on a daily basis. I don't see how that is not impacting.
No, it's very misleading. So, if we determine that we're able to go forward with an early action, which is not a requirement under CERCLA, not every project has a strong technical justification to perform it, but it can basically, you're looking at either a time critical or a non-time critical. By calling it a non-time critical gives the impression that it is not of importance, and that is not correct, but it is misleading that way. So it's the type of imminent risk that is associated, whether it's time critical or not. It's still imminent risk, but there's not this immediate, gosh, I'm going to remember the right terminology, Rich. Yeah, acute. Thank you. Acute imminent risk where time critical would be triggered, and you have certain timelines that you have to complete it in once an action memo is signed. And so the non-time critical is still imminent risk, but it is not acute. And so it just gives us there's a little more leeway with the time that we can take to complete it with going through the contracting effort. It's not to indicate that it's not important or there's not, we want to go through the process best as fast as possible. But I'll let Rich kind of add to that.
Yeah, it's this time critical, non-time critical. It's government speak. But if we use Bradford Island itself, and then let's say the landfill as an example, right? There has been significant erosion of the riverbank, mass wasting going off into the river, and you can go along the river, and I think, Kate, you have a video of that shows that, there's a significant erosion happening from the river, right? So if there was enough erosion that pieces of the landfill were actually exposed and falling off into the river, I think that would be a good justification. That would be a justification for a time critical removal action. And that is an emergency response that's used on-scene coordinators, EPA on-scene coordinators, things like oil spills and things like that, where it is immediate, like you have to go and get this stuff up. It's not very precise though. I mean, you get the stuff up, but it's not comprehensive, right? So the non-time critical, and like I said, like we've been saying, it's just semantics here. So there is the risk, like if there is more erosion happening, like there is the risk that this could happen. So we want to expedite the removal of that area. And it is a removal, it's not just a remedy, right? If we were to go through the process and say, well, there's not a lot of erosion happening, there isn't a substantial risk of exposure towards the public, the remedy might not be excavating the landfill. It may be capping it. It may be preventing ecological receptors from hitting it or from getting contaminated, or prevent water from migrating through the material into the river. So it's not necessarily, the remedy is comprehensive in that it reduces risk, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a removal. But because that there is significant erosion happening along the riverbank, and there is justification to say, you know what, let's just remove that material. And also it takes care of like further investigating the landfill as well, right? If we said, well, we should just cap it, we should just do a regular remedy, we would still be investigating that area, and we would still be waiting on the results of that investigation just for us to say, well, maybe we should remove it, or maybe we could remove it. But let's examine all through a feasibility study, let's examine all the different alternatives and see which one makes more sense. Whereas this one, it is, hey, look, there could be something happening in the future. It's not imminent, it's not acute, but it is enough for us to say, let's just dig it up and let's just get it out of there. And then afterwards, we can come back and say, was there anything left on the surface? Like the non-time critical, exactly. It's cleaner than the time critical, but there's still going to be a remedy afterwards, where we look at the leaf surface, we look at what's left behind, if there is anything, hopefully not, knock on wood.
Right, hopefully not. Yeah,
hopefully not, but if there is, then yeah. Well, even if there isn't, right, there's still going to be a final determination on if there is more actions, more things that need to be taken to mitigate that risk and to prevent exposure to biota and humans and things like that. So it's a process, but it's a means for us to get out there and remove this stuff without having a lot of red tape associated with it. You know, different revenue review
especially
boards and higher ups, you know, poking their nose in our business, right? Nobody.
yeah, and I will say again, because our big thing here is that we understand kind of that slope stability that's a concern, and this addresses that potential mass wasting into the river, and that's why there's such a gap. If we can move the slide up to the upland OU table just for a second. Okay, and this kind of leads into where we see kind of a big it's a little bit of a gap between work plan and an SRI, because we were just out in the field collecting information as part of the Upland OU SRI, but we want to make sure that we have that information from this non-time critical, because all of that will be taken into account to determine if a final remedy is needed or if no further action is needed, because this early action was able to address the current risk and future risk.
This is Kate. I have a question. Is there anyone tasked with monitoring areas such as the cliffside around the landfill from the most accessible point, which would be in a boat in the water, to monitor for that occasion where there may be something that develops, like the wasting becomes enough to reach materials from the landfill? Like, how is that just, the public would have to flag that, or are there actual folks who are tasked with regularly monitoring that?
So we, as we were kind of scoping all of this out, like we were looking at, whenever we've gone out in the field to do sampling, like when we did phase 1, we went out and took photos to see. Luckily, we're kind of at that point because we're moving forward with this non-time critical, and we're, moving forward with executing that. I would say that's less of a concern, because if there is some mass wasting, it's not going to be to an extent that it will rush the process. But since we are taking care of that early action now, I would say if we weren't doing the non-time critical and we were only going through the normal CERCLA process and awaiting, going through the ROD, then doing design and selecting the remedy, I do think that probably would have been something that we would have kind of needed to do to ensure that nothing was triggered. We're like, hey, now we think we might have a bigger issue. But because we know that we're going out there to address this issue, I mean, that's what we're going to do right now. So monitoring that at this point, I mean, we're going to be going out in the field, like we talked about for the phase 2, and we planned on taking pictures again and seeing if there was any movement, but I think it'll be less of a concern knowing that we already have a plan to go and address it.
So thank you. So there's no record of historical monitoring and documentation, like photographic documentation, so there can be, like, for example, a year-to-year or season-to-season comparison, so that whoever happens to be out on the boat, when you get eyes on it, has some sort of context or frame of reference for whether things have changed over time?
I think as the team has been out there.
Sorry,
go
I'm
ahead.
asking not just.
I didn't mean to cut you off. No, you go ahead and finish, Kate.
No, I just wanted to clarify. I'm not just asking because I'm trying to dig in about specifically the landfill, but I'm trying to understand, like, what type of protocol might exist for other areas that have similar circumstances, and just kind of understanding, like, how that's being assessed, given that, if you're just looking at it on any given day, you really, unless you see a piece of garbage sticking out of the side, you're not going to have context as to whether there's been significant wasting over even the last 6 months or a year. So yeah, I'm just trying to understand, like, how that gets assessed in general.
Yeah, and and I think, and when I say mass wasting, I don't necessarily mean like mass as like waste material, like landfill material. From my understanding with the landfill, I mean, they had kind of pits that debris was kind of placed into. That debris isn't really the risk of going to the river. It's the contaminated material, the contaminated soil,
Right.
that we're trying to kind of address. I want to make sure that for folks, I don't want to create that situation. I don't believe there was necessarily any, I would say, scheduled monitoring. I know that at some point there were questions, and I think as there were investigations of going out in the boat, whether they were sampling and folks can see it. I mean, obviously there's lots of, shouldn't say there's lots of activity, but there is enough activity that there wasn't anything that was of a noticeable shift for folks where that it got brought to the team's attention that I'm aware of. But there was not just routine monitoring of, specifically going out, taking a picture every, so many months and monitoring to see if that changed. As part of the RI, when we're looking at site conditions, all of that is recorded that, hey, this is kind of the slope we have, this is the current conditions, but I do not believe any routine monitoring up to that point was done.
I think that's really helpful for the public to be aware of. I think a lot of times the public might assume that there's someone, if they see something, they might not say something because they assume somebody's tracking it. So
Sure.
It's good for the public to know that if they see something that seems worth mentioning, that they should mention it. And also, I would recommend for future just general protocols having, if we've identified an area with the potential for it to escalate to time critical, that we, there's maybe some protocols established for monitoring.
I just want to mention that, so we don't have side conversations, that there was a question in the chat from Val.
Yeah, I'd like to address that actually.
Okay.
So Val asked, can RAB members submit written comments for the SMP? Rich Francis wrote back, unfortunately, no, the SMP has been reviewed by regulators from EPA, ODEQ, that's Oregon Department of Environmental Quality, and Washington Ecology, and 3 tribes. Public comment is reserved for decision documents such as record of decision. So I want to make some clarifying points to what Rich said. He's absolutely correct. When we talk about review and comment, those are very specific terms referring to formal review and comment periods. But that said, the RAB has the document to look at, and if folks want to provide some further written feedback after this meeting, you are welcome to email either me or email our public comment box. If we could get any further feedback by the next week, that would be very helpful. We do have quite a lot of other stuff to cover. EPA is here to talk about some downriver fish sampling that's happened. So if there's no further questions right now on the SMP, I'd like to turn it over to EPA.
Thanks, Megan. So I'll give Matt his time, and I'll make this really brief. We talked about this at the last meeting, and unfortunately Matt was on paid time off, having much needed break, and I really wanted him to be the one to give this presentation because he is our ecological toxicologist. He is much more of an expert on this than I am. I would just mess it up more than these fish got messed up. But I did want to have a little context here, and that is, you're going to see some data and you're going to have a lot of questions, but I will tell you this, that this investigation was done, to assist Department of Ecology in their Columbia River survey, as well as assisting Oregon Health Authority, which David and Dana, thank you for being here tonight, to help in their determination on whether a fish advisory should be expanded to downstream of the dam. This data that was collected will not be used for to make a circular determination, because the fish that were caught and the downstream area, that area is part of the phase 2 investigation. So that area is going to be investigated. And the data, when we looked at the fish, we're like, well, we should go investigate that area, which we're going to go do. So just want to kind of put all that in context and say that, we are investigating the area where these fish are caught. And with that, I'll hand it off to Matt.
Hi, folks. I'm Matt Luxon. As Rich said, I'm an environmental toxicologist and ecological risk assessor for EPA Region 10. I'm going to talk about the PCB concentrations in the fish that were collected downstream of Bradford Island this past fall. As indicated, this was a collaborative effort with the Department of Ecology. Jacob Bednarik was the lead for ecology in the environmental assessment program. EPA provided additional assistance. We provided money for analysis, high resolution analysis of the data. We assisted them in designing the sampling and collecting the fish and processing them in the lab. So for background, as you're, I'm sure, aware, there is a fish consumption advisory in place for the area upstream of the dam. Oregon Health Authority and Washington Department of Health advise people not to eat resident fish from an area 1 mile above the dam due to high levels of PCBs in their fish, in their tissue. The question that this work was conducted to answer is whether that fish consumption advisory should be extended downstream of the dam. So the area downstream of the dam is popular for fishing for both recreational as well as tribal fisher persons. And smallmouth bass collected upstream of the dam between 2006 and 2022 have highly elevated PCB concentrations. Yeah.
Can you speak directly into your speaker? It's a little hard to hear. And then just let me know when to forward slides. Thank you.
Oh yeah, sorry. I'm working on my own slide back here.
It's still hard to hear.
Is that okay? Is that better?
That's better.
Okay, I'll try and speak right up close to my computer. So yes, I'm on slide 3 now. We're all caught up. As you can, so between 2006 and 2022, there have been several rounds of fish tissue collection from the Bradford Island site upstream of the Bonneville Dam. And these fish have highly elevated PCB concentrations. PCBs are the principal contaminant of concern at the Superfund site and are primary interest for potential risks to human health and ecological protection. So I don't know, you guys are probably all familiar with the site, and the Bradford Island is depicted here, and the dam with the PCB site being on the upper part of the screen, and the north shore of Bradford Island is really where that high levels of contamination are present. So as part of the site investigation, the U.S. Geological Survey conducted tracking studies of smallmouth bass in 2020 and 2022. The results of those studies showed that some of the bass were moving from Bradford Island Superfund site downstream of the dam. So as a result, Oregon Health Authority, Washington Department of Health, and the Yakima Nation expressed concern that the fish advisory may need to be extended downstream of the dam. EPA learned that Ecology's environmental assessment program was going to be sampling the Columbia in 2024 and 2025. So we reached out to Jacob Bednarik to arrange inclusion of this area in their assessment. So we can go to the next slide. So this slide shows the areas where fish were sampled downstream of the dam. So the area immediately downstream of the dam for 1 mile is shown on the right side. And those are the actual areas where we conducted the sampling. and then further downstream from river miles 145 to 146 in the vicinity of Skamania and Pierce Island there on the left. Go ahead, next slide. So samples were collected and processed following Ecology's Environmental Assistance Program protocols. We collected them using an electrofishing boat as shown here. We collected the samples in the middle of the night because that's when it's easiest to do this. It's a highly effective way of targeting and collecting the fish. Next slide. So once the fish were captured on the boat, they were put into separate holding tanks. Then they were killed, measured, packaged, and labeled on the boat and transported to Ecology's lab on ice where they were frozen until processing. As you can see in the upper left picture on these slides, these are large-scale sucker in the holding tank. And then when they were processed at Ecology's lab in Olympia, they were weighed, measured again, tissues collected for aging, and then each fish was ground whole in a large commercial blender, as shown in the upper right here, and equal aliquots from each of 3 fish were combined together to make a single composite sample. Then these aliquots of that fish slurry were put into sample jars and sent off to the labs for chemical analysis. This list on the left are all of the chemicals that will be analyzed for. I'm just going to talk about the PCB congener data today. The additional data are expected in April of next year and maybe rolling in a little bit at a time before then. The data will all be finalized by October of next year. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the samples that were collected. As you can see here are the locations on the left, Bonneville Dam and Skamania. Skamania was sampled first, then Bonneville. The species are somewhat different between the site. The species that were collected are basically a subset of fish that might be targeted by anglers and that are resident species that are likely to bioaccumulate things like PCBs and mercury. The size range is the size range for adult fish that might be targeted by anglers, and these are the age data shows these are 1 to 4 year old fish. And then the number of samples on the right, you see that we have several composites for each of the different species. And then for the smallmouth bass, there's 4 composites. All the composites are 3 fish per sample. But for smallmouth bass, we had 2 individual fish that were analyzed separately. Next slide, please. So these are the PCB data. This is the total PCBs. So these are all the different PCB congeners combined together to create a total PCB concentration. And these are typically what's used to assess risks associated with PCBs, 209 congeners. And so what you see here, the data are shown as box plots. The box plots are broken into 4 pieces, basically with the line on the bottom going from the minimum concentration to 25% of the data. The line in the middle is 50% of the data. The top of the box is 75% of the data, and the top line is the maximum concentration. For if concentrations are higher than the theoretical maximum, they're shown as a dot, as shown for largemouth bass on the right, where that's an unexpectedly high concentration for the largemouth bass based on the rest of those composite samples. Regardless, what this shows is that the smallmouth bass had the highest average concentrations in the Bonneville Dam samples, followed by northern pike minnow and large-scale sucker. The smallmouth bass individuals had similar concentrations to the composite samples. And then the further downstream Skamania samples were somewhat similar to those from just downstream of the dam, with peamouth having similar concentrations to smallmouth bass downstream, but then the other fish from further downstream having somewhat lower concentrations of PCBs. Go ahead and go on to the next slide. Oh.
You want me to go back to
Kelly?
that? Yes.
Can we go to the next slide?
Yeah, it was just showing the quintiles, so.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, sorry.
It's
I thought I
confusing when you
removed
start throwing up cues. It gets confusing.
Okay, here we go. So this is another way of looking at the data. This shows each of the individual samples. And this slide compares the data for these composite samples collected downstream of the dam to the previous samples of smallmouth bass that were collected upstream of the dam in the most recent sampling efforts. So what you see is that the maximum concentrations from each sampling event are shown on the right, and then each of the respective samples to the left of that represent a smaller proportion of the data. So, for example, in the bottom green graph, 50% of the samples fall to the left of that third dot. And so this allows you to compare the range of concentrations from each sampling event to the others. And what you will also recognize or see is that the scale on the left side is a log scale. So the first group of data goes from 1 part per billion or microgram per kilogram wet weight to 10. The next goes to 10 to 100, 100 to 1,000, 1,000 to 10,000. So each of those lines within those groups increases by that factor. So the first one, the first counting up the left, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, then 10, 20, 30, 40, et cetera, up to 100. So you see that these concentrations of the 2022 and 2020 samples are substantially higher than the concentrations caught downstream of the dam in 2024. And if you take the rightmost sample on the green line and you follow that 40 parts per billion number across to the left, you see that it intersects the orange line at about 10%. So 90% of the samples collected in 2022 are higher than the maximum concentration collected in 2024. And 99% of the samples collected in 2020 are higher than the maximum concentration collected downstream of the dam in 2024. And just looking at these averages, the 2022 average is about 3 times higher than the 2024, and the 2020 is more than 10 times higher than the below dam data. I think we can go ahead and go.
We have a question in the room.
Yeah,
Thanks.
go ahead.
Sorry, this is Kate. I'm just, for clarification, the human health level, acceptable level on this graph, and this would be equivalent to parts per billion, that would still be at 1.5, is that correct?
I'm going to show that on the next graph we're going to talk about.
Oh, okay,
So
thank you.
let's go ahead and jump to the next graph. And David Ferrer is in the room, and he can probably speak more direct, or not in the room, but online. He can, of Oregon Health Authority, if we have questions about that, David might be able to answer them. So this puts the data in perspective of a larger scale. This is a graph that I grabbed out of the Washington State PCB Chemical Action Plan that shows the distribution of all PCB fish tissue chemistry data that they could put their hands on, collected from throughout the state of Washington. And what this shows here is that the average concentration of about 40 parts per billion collected from downstream of the dam falls at about the 80th percentile of fish collected from throughout the state of Washington. Go ahead and click the next, click next on this.
Sorry, this is Kate again. Can you go back a slide? Because I understand you're comparing it there to all of Washington, but when we're looking at this graph, where would the human health limitation for exposure fall on this graph? Would that
So
still
the
be
next graph,
the
the next table or graph has those data on it. It says the human health Bradford Island risk-based concentration in tissue for human health is 1.5 parts per billion for the most sensitive human receptor group, which is a tribal subsistence fisher person's nursing infant. So
and on this graph,
data,
micrograms per kilogram equals parts per billion, is that accurate?
That's correct. That is,
okay, so it would be at 1.
Translates to parts per billion.
Okay, so in this, when we look at these, so another way to say that would be that every fish caught pretty much was above the acceptable level for human health exposure for sensitive populations.
That's correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
1 second, please. There's a comment in the chat. Megan, do you want to speak to that? Okay, so, or I can just jump in. Okay, so Amanda Wozab from DEQ, her comment is, it seems like there's a significant difference in the size of the sample sets between the years.
That's correct. The data from 2020 and 2022 are individual fish, and there was a large number of samples collected in those efforts. The below dam data, the number of samples collected there were consistent with the Department of Ecology protocols, and in fact are somewhat higher. These are composite samples, so each of these represent 3 fish, except for those 2 individual samples. So what you're looking at here is 12 fish in the composites plus 2 more, so 14 fish compared to 87 or 69 fish. So that's, are there further questions with regards to the number of fish sampled?
Yes, there's a comment from Carl Merkel. Are there going to be any further studies? Sample size looks small, if I understand the slide correctly. N equals 6.
The sample size on.
Yeah, this is Rich. This is Rich. I think Matt already described it. The N is just the number of samples, but they're composites. So 4 of them were 3 fish. And I will say, from a circular perspective, we generally look at fish tissue to see if there is a risk in order to take action, and we have that. We had that from the 2020 data. So on the other side of a remedy, once there is a remedy put in place, there will be some more studies concerning the efficacy of the remedy itself. But Washington Ecology is doing surveys all up and down the river. There's also a Columbia River Restoration program that is being put in place that also is looking at fish up and down the river as well.
Okay, thank you. And then David Farrer, he says we use 8 parts per billion in Oregon to decide whether we need an advisory over 8 parts per G. Maybe that's a typo. We do.
That's a typo.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's a typo.
Okay, parts per billion, we do.
And then 1.5% of their population.
I had a question to ask on this. So if I'm getting this right, since 2020, we've known that these fish are contaminated below the dam at unsafe levels to human consumption.
I apologize to speak.
What point do we put an advisory below the dam? What do we have to do to get that done?
No, the 2020 and 2022 data is from above the dam.
Oh, it's from above the dam.
Correct. Yeah.
And so this is the only thing that we know since nobody's done anything below the dam until now.
I can't answer to that. I was assigned to this site after I got.
Well, okay, that falls back to my other question. What do we do? What do we have to do as the general public to force the hand of whoever puts this advisory out? Because it obviously needs to be there.
Well, I can't speak for you. We don't generally do fish advisories. When we start the actual action out there, the remedy, and we start dredging and kicking up a bunch of materials, we'll have our own fish advisory. But yeah, I welcome OHA to discuss that.
And David has his hand up.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so Oregon Health Authority, we're the ones that issue fish advisories. We share that responsibility with Washington on the Columbia, since it's a shared border. But we really, before we can issue an advisory, we need the data. We need to know what the fish tissue data are. So we've seen this data, for a few weeks longer than you've seen it. Like, this is still very new, and there's more data coming, right? We don't know yet, for example, the mercury data levels for these samples, and we don't know the PFAS levels for these samples. And those are likely to have an influence in what the ultimate advisory is downstream. So we do work as quick as we can once we have data to get the advisory out. But currently, we're waiting on some of that data. We're encouraged that the levels are so much lower below the dam. The advisory upstream from the dam is a do not eat, like don't eat any fish, resident fish caught in there. But in downstream from the dam, if it were based on PCBs only, we would be able to allow some fish consumption. So there would still be an advisory, but it would be like less stringent. It's like enough less stringent that some fish consumption could happen safely. But we can't say that for sure yet, because we don't know yet about the mercury and the PFAS, which is what we're waiting for. That could change it. But based on PCBs only, the levels are much, much lower in the downstream, which is good. But we have to wait to see about the rest of the data before we can make that final call on the advisory.
I have one more question. This is Kate. Just to clarify, PAHs were not included in the sample as part of the testing?
That's correct. There were no PAHs. Generally, PAHs do not accumulate in fish tissue. Fish readily break them down, and so the levels of PCBs in fish are generally somewhat low.
Thank you.
So I have one more slide if you guys want to see that. I think we've discussed the slide 10 pretty thoroughly. We can go to slide 11. This shows the data spatially back at the Bradford Island site. The data so looking from above Bradford Island, you see the dam and then the orange lines where the fish were collected. There's a bunch of dots on the left side just to show that there are 6 samples from there, but those are all averages of fish caught from both these orange bars. So they don't represent individual locations. And these are again compared to the 2020 and 2022 upstream samples. And if you look at the colors of the individual samples, you see there's yellow, which is less than 20 parts per billion, and that's kind of an arbitrary low concentration range. Then 21 to 61, again, that's up to the maximum concentration caught downstream of the dam. Then pink up to 180, which is the tissue residue effect concentration associated with ecological effects, and that's the lowest ecological effects threshold. And then 180 to parts per billion to 1 part per million, or 1,000 parts per billion, and 1,100 parts per billion to 4,200 parts per billion are high concentrations. So you see spatially that the highest concentration samples were collected in the direct vicinity of Bradford Island, where the where the electrical equipment were removed from the site. As you move upstream from the most contaminated area, you see that the fish tissue concentrations on average, there are fewer high concentration fish. And then as you go above this white vertical dotted line, which is 1 mile upstream, you see that all of the samples collected upstream of there are in this less than 20 parts per billion range. So you see that the samples collected downstream of the dam are kind of in this, what I would just say is a intermediate low concentration range, and substantially lower than the concentrations of fish collected upstream of the dam. And one of the reasons that we collect smallmouth bass for these efforts is because in general, they have a very small home range. Sometimes many fish in the fish tracking area never left the vicinity of the north shore of Bradford Island, even though a few of them then went many, many miles upstream and some of them went many miles downstream. Most of the fish, smallmouth bass, are collected close to their relatively small home range. So with that, that's the end of my presentation. I'll be happy to take any further questions.
Mitch Patton had a question on the chart that's up here right now. Do we have any models, or is there anything that we can use to look at, I think it would be called the current, not flow. So I can kind of look at, as that water comes out of the dam itself, and then the second, or the first powerhouse, there's a huge stream of water that comes out of there, hits the north shore of Washington, and is forced with the angle of that to go downstream. So everything above Cascade Island is kind of like a back eddy, basically, except for what comes through the second powerhouse, which there shouldn't be any of the PCBs shouldn't have been able to even get up in that area, because it can't possibly get from the north side of Bradford Island to that inlet side of the second powerhouse. It's impossible for that PCBs to get over there. So if we had a chart that we could see where that river's flowing, like, I don't know if flow is the right word or current's the right word to use. You know, like you see for a jet stream, it shows in the air, it shows where that jet stream is going, what it's circulating, what it's doing. Do they have anything that shows that Or river?
I think as Jay would probably be happy to show you, this is a lot of the data and thinking that went into this OU2 sampling plan to try and capture the dynamics of sediments in this system to determine where these sediment samples will be collected to see how those PCBs are distributed from that North Shore around the foreshore area and downstream.
This is Megan. I can add to that a bit. Probably the most readily available place to look at current modeling maps is the Phase 1 river work plan. There was different sample locations shown on top of current maps that kind of shows that flow, especially upriver of the dam.
Yeah, because the only thing I've been able to come up with so far is like just a river chart that shows the bottom, the deep holes and stuff. Like down at Skamania, there's a fairly deep hole that's I think over 100 feet down there. But I don't know where the current or the flow of the river, how does it direct at that? Does it shoot back to the Oregon side, or does that current stay and be depositing the PCBs that are coming through the dam into these large holes on the bottom of the river? And I just don't see how it's going to back any up into the second powerhouse canal. I just don't see that happening.
I would recommend taking a look through some of the figures from the Phase 1 work plan. I think that would be helpful.
Okay.
And some of that, there were some limited figures shown at last month's meeting as well. So if you look back in your inbox to the slides, there'll be a little bit of that, but there's more of those figures in the Phase 1 work plan.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I see that I incorrectly heard Kelly's or someone's question about PFAS. They were talking about PFAS, and I thought it was PAH that was mentioned. PFAS are being analyzed for in.
No, you were right. It was PAH. I was curious about because they
Okay,
weren't.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Any further questions on this presentation from EPA?
From EPA or for EPA?
For EPA.
Well, I do have something to say. You know, we looked at some older USGS river flow maps to look at where some of the flows may be, and a lot of it is kind of right actually where those people are fishing, and so there is going to be some sampling done right there where we're fishing. You can see that on the picture.
Was it a back eddy flow or is it a?
No, it's a little bit downstream from. Actually, it's like directly from the Bonneville Dam itself. So, but you know, it's like fish swim, right? So it's hard. It's hard to say, and this is kind of the what's being discussed. On the regulatory side is, fish data is good for us to say, hey, look, there's contaminated fish, there's risk there. We need to take action. It's very hard to say, we caught this fish from this location, so therefore the contamination is at that location. It's really hard to do that. And so we can't, a lot of times we can't base a circular decision off of, at least like where to sample and things like that, off of, those locations. But we are looking at all the fish data, clam data, sculpin data. We're looking at that and it's all, honestly, it's all really part of the administrative record, all that data for those of you, data geeks like me, go in there and look at that. So, yeah.
And in the chat, David Farr with Oregon Health Authority offered to answer any further questions that the Rapper public may have about fish advisories.
Let's go ahead and open it up to the public too for any questions on this presentation or is related to the fish advisory. Okay, not seeing anything new in the chat. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide then. Okay, so looking ahead at our upcoming RAB meeting dates, our next meeting will be on November 4th. This is rescheduled from our normal second Tuesday since the second Tuesday is a public holiday. And then we'll be looking at meeting January 13th and March 10th. We're currently planning for online only in November and January. We can, as we get a little bit closer, talk about online in March as well. I believe this past year we did do online only in March due to weather concerns. One of the next topics that will be coming up in future months will be providing an overview of Cascades Island. I'll probably be doing that sometime after we get the new contractor on board. Are there any other potential topics that RAB members or members of the public would like to see?
This is Mitch Patton again. So on our November, January meetings that are hybrid only, I'm wondering if we were to find somebody down in the Vancouver, Washougal area out of the gorge, if that weather thing would be taken out of the equation.
I think it would still be a concern in January and March for sure. If folks want to consider a November hybrid, I'm happy to entertain that. January and March just get hairy no matter where we are, even if we were to meet in the middle of Vancouver or Portland. Would other members, RAB members, like to discuss the possibility of hybrid for November?
Where was, we have no place in Stevenson or nothing to have that if it was?
We would have to, we don't have anything booked for November as we've been planning that online. I believe we've had that listed on as online for a little while now, so we don't have anything booked. The Corps can take the action to look into in-person places and do our best with it. We obviously can't make any guarantees of where that would be, but.
I guess the one other thing I wanted to bring up, I know we're running out of time here, but I wanted to see if there was some way that the RAB or Army Corps could maybe post the link to the Columbia River, the last video that you put out, I thought was very informative for the public. Wondering if there's any way that that could be added to a link on the Army Corps page, or would that be stepping outside the box? And somehow to show appreciation to the Yakima Nation and the Columbia River Keepers for everything that they've done. Because without them, I don't think we'd be sitting here having this discussion right now.
So some of that cut off for me was the request to post the Columbia River Keepers press release on a Corps website.
That last one that came out.
It's a video.
Gotcha. So we don't post for other folks' press releases. We do plan on having a press release for the non-time critical removal action. So we will have some, some other project press releases coming up. But as a practice, we don't post for other agencies or organizations.
Megan, just for context, it's not a press release. It's an educational video that was done in collaboration with Yakima Nation.
Okay.
Informative for the public, I think. But that's our job.
I'm happy to send a link for review. I just wanted to offer that context.
Is it, this is Rich, is it an Instagram link? Because I know you shared some links before. It's YouTube, okay, okay. I was just saying, because we can't access Instagram.
Yeah.
Probably get away with YouTube.
I tried to send the YouTube one, so more accessible.
I guess the other thing that I had in that question wrapped up in it was too, is to show some type of notification to the Columbia River Keepers and the Yakima Nation, which I know the Yakima Nation is one of the people that's really pushed on this thing. And without them, like I said, I don't think we'd be sitting here having this discussion without them. So somehow we need to show appreciation to them, and as being a RAB member, I think it's something that we need to come up with a plan on how to do that.
Well, I welcome the RAP to discuss if there's some way you want to do that. And of course, you know, if you folks want to deliver a joint message to Columbia River Keepers or Yakima Nation, you're of course welcome to do that.
It's not something that Army Corps is willing to do.
The Army Corps, I mean, we provide our own communications to different organizations, but the RAB is really not the Army Corps, and the Army Corps is not the RAB. The RAB is really meant to represent the public, not the Corps. So I would recommend that if the Corps wants to show particular appreciations to folks, or to highlight, you know, certain organizations' efforts and stuff, to do that as the RAB. So, you know, the Corps doesn't speak for the public, and vice versa, you know.
Okay.
Hey, this is Kate. I have a separate request for the Corps, which would be like when I Google, for example, Bradford Island Restoration Advisory Board meetings, the first thing that comes up is a press release for the April meeting 2025. I'd just like to reiterate the request to have these meeting times established, particularly the future meeting times that are already established, clearly on the Army Corps website somewhere in a standard fashion, so that people can reliably return to the same page, not a separate press release every time, to try and track when these meetings happen. We have 2 people, thank you, Tom and Diana, who regularly show up to these meetings from the general public. There may be others. I know there was some in our Stevenson meeting, but I think that's a pretty big indicator that we're not doing a good job of making this like available and accessible to the public. So I think something the Corps could do on their end is to have that, you know, more organized on the website, and then, you know, do a social media post on their social media page when there's a meeting coming up, so folks actually know that it's happening. Because we'll try to do on our end things to spread the word, but you know, the Army Corps does have some evidence of promoting RAB meetings, or like at least making that information public. So it'd be great if all of that could be accessible in the same place every month.
Yeah, I know we do press releases for the RAB meetings and other such public meetings. I'll chat with our webmaster to make sure we're getting all that information on the website as well. So we're really covering our bases, and talk to our social media manager.
Yeah,
thanks for that suggestion.
If we could have all the RAB information on one page instead of mixed up with all of the other Army Corps press releases, that would be super helpful. Because if people are trying to find information for how to show up to a meeting, they're not going to scroll through all the Army Corps press releases about a bunch of different topics and assume that they're in the right place to just keep scrolling and find the last press release, particularly when the first one that pops up is from April. So if we could get that all in one place on one page on the website, that would be, I think, super helpful for public. Yeah.
The intention is to always have that on the website, but what we might have to do is look into our metadata to make sure that that's popping up first when people do searches. So I'll take that comment back. Thank you. I think in terms of our actual agenda, we're technically on the next slide, as we've moved right into we moved right into RAB discussion. Are there any other comments, questions, discussion points from the RAB? Okay, I'll open up to members of the public for any questions, comments, thoughts to share, feedback.
This is Mitch Patton. I guess I had a question on the other one and I forgot to do this right now. And it was on public comment sent to, you guys call it, what is that email address that you guys have? Information at Bradford Island, or?
Sorry, Mitch, can you restate? It broke up a little bit
that's
on my
Bradford
side.
Island Public, yeah, the Bradford Island Public comment box,
Yes.
inbox.
Yeah.
You could get the box.
Tin
I know, right?
So, how do we, or are we as a RAB, can we have that sent to us, or is that something that we cannot yet?
So we've talked about this before. We can't forward on emails. We have a lot of restrictions on our emails, both security and PII. If we do get comments in the inbox that folks have asked to share that with the RAB, we can absolutely, with their express permission, we can forward that on to the RAB members. So for example, Mitch, you had made some comments to the comment inbox, and I asked if you would like that sent on to your fellow RAB members and then followed up with your permission to do so. That said, we haven't gotten any other emails there. In my tenure as the project manager, the only comments we have gotten in the inbox were on the engineering evaluation and cost analysis document
But
that
if
had
a person
public
did
review associated. And so those got posted as part of that document.
okay, but if a person did a public records request, then you would have to give that to us or not? If there was anything in there even at all.
If there's a public records request, that's not really the inbox for that, but we would forward them on to the right resource to do so. And then, yeah, anything that is available to them from the FOIA Act, of course, they would be provided that.
I think it's FOIA. I'm not sure, but I think it may be FOIA.gov.
That's not even the Bradford Island thing?
No, if you just put in a formal records request through the Freedom of Information Act, I think you have to go through the FOIA.gov website.
Mhm.
I think,
Sometimes they make you pay for it.
yeah, sometimes they make you pay for it. Nothing's free, right?
Okay. That's all I have for today.
Okay. Thanks, Mitch. Anything else from either our RAB members or public members? All right, I unintentionally stole a lot of the administrative stuff from Asa because I've been doing this on my own for a little while, and I apologize. Asa, I'm going to hand it over to you to close the meeting.
No, that's fine. Mine was popping in and out because of the lightning strike. So it's actually for the best because I probably would have been cut out. So no, I appreciate it. Yeah. And thanks for the opportunity.
You are cutting now.
Yeah, I think we might have lost Asa. Okay. Well, we are at 7 o'clock. There are no further questions or comments from our participants here. So I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you. And I already heard a second. Thank you all very much. This concludes our September meeting. We will see you in November.